Hello everyone. Today I'll just be giving some very brief commentary on a recent clear of Mushihimesama original, or not original, the 1.0 version Maniac mode. So this is done using or played using the Steam port that is widely available and pretty much the standard as far as I guess how people play this game unless they have the PCB or the PS2 version, I suppose. But that's a bit more rare. Anyway, since I'm sure most people viewing this video will be familiar with the game already, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about Maniac mode. So, from my understanding, it's a mode that increases bullet density but also makes them slower. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but the original intention was to make the game feel more like a more standard Danmaku or what Cave was, other games that Cave was making at the time. And this contrasts with the original mode, which kind of features faster bullets, but also sparser bullet patterns as well. And so just looking at the first stage, you can kind of see that, yes, indeed, compared to original mode, Maniac mode's bullet patterns are a bit more dense. But the thing with the density is that it also increases the slowdown on top of the bullet speeds already being slower. So then on the topic of whether or not Maniac is more difficult than original, which is what the name may imply because of the, I guess, progressive nature of these modes. For example, original, Maniac, and Ultra. Um, I believe that Maniac is actually um, the same difficulty, if not maybe even a little bit easier than original. And of course, I'm going to qualify that by saying that I played Maniac after uh, my experience with the original, and also that I've cleared this mode a bit later than my start to shmups. So I guess the background is I got my first 1cc in Mushi Original probably back in somewhere around 2021. And so now it's, of course, a couple years past that. And revisiting this game, I wanted to clear the Maniac mode. So suffice to say, I'm sure my skills have somewhat grown between then and now. But with that aside, I still think that this mode is at least of similar difficulty to original. And I think, or maybe at most, similar difficulty, if not a little bit easier. And maybe I should talk about why. I think that in original mode, there are a lot of maybe I would say gotcha moments where the bullet speeds are pretty fast, and unless you kind of can anticipate or know how to react to certain things, then they're probably going to get you. And so I found that playing original mode required a little bit more routing and a little bit more um, practice than this Maniac clear. In Maniac mode, the bullet speeds even though the bullets, even though they're denser, they're slow enough such that if you have some experience playing these types of games, you can recognize the pattern and dodge it pretty easily. Or maybe I shouldn't say easily, but you have a greater capacity to dodge them than if it was original and a really fast bullet pattern is getting you. Here I bombed because I got trapped. But I was able to kind of react to that, so that's okay. Um, Whereas in, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I think my point is that in original mode, there are times where you can't really react and you have to kind of know what's coming. And you might say, like, well, memorization isn't exactly challenge, but I'm more just referring to my experience and how long it took me to clear the original mode for the first time, how long it took me to um, clear Maniac for the first time, as well as some of the hurdles that I encountered with Maniac and original. And I'm just saying that Maniac mode I had less problems with, um, you know, unreactable patterns or mistakes of that. So with that being said, you can see I'm playing W type here. I think it's a pretty common choice to play S power for original, and W power for Maniac. And I think the reason for that is because S power is really good in original because the bullet speeds are faster. And so if you want to be macro dodging around certain fast patterns, you really need to have that additional speed. Whereas W power in Maniac is good because you want to be fitting through some smaller gaps with a bit more control when you use the focus shot and you kind of slow to a crawl. Um, so that's why I chose W type here, and it served me well enough for this run. So The first two stages are really nothing too unusual. I go with formation again, using a very similar strategy to original, where I want that additional screen coverage that the formation option gets me in order to, you know, uh, approach stage three. This is just the stage 2 boss. I'm dodging most of the patterns in focus mode, but whenever I can, I'm using the focus shot. The nice thing about or the super shot, excuse me. Something that I like about W power is that the point blank damage is really high, and coupled that with the super shot, it actually is pretty fun to see how fast you can kill large enemies by point blanking them. And that also really factors into the boss strategies as well, where you can attempt to skip different phases or different patterns with some well-timed point blanking if you have the opportunity. Aside from that, I think that overall in this run you'll see that I make some pretty large mistakes, but despite that, I still managed to eke out the clear, and I'll kind of point to the mistakes that I made. And I kind of refer to this as a bit of like a safety net because it kind of has, or this run has demonstrated to myself that, well, I could, I can make like three crucial errors or something like that before the run becomes unwinnable. Um, and of course, you can lose all your lives in the very start of the game and then just go sicko mode and completely no miss no bomb the rest of the game or whatever. But you know, taking it from a balanced perspective, at least what this run tells me, as far as information goes, is yeah, like I think it's still quite feasible to clear a game with a mistake, three mistake threshold, that sort of thing. And I guess that's helpful because I've played this game for quite a while at this point, and I always come back to it, trying out the different modes. And it's good to just kind of evaluate where you're at skill wise. So the thing with Maniac mode, especially apparent in this stage, is that when the screen gets really flooded with bullets because the bullet patterns are denser, um, a lot more slowdown occurs. And I've heard people talk about this before with regards to this game, but I didn't really understand the shotgun effect until I played Maniac mode because the game slows down a fair bit in this stage, and it equally speeds back up in a very quick, or it speeds back up in a very kind of unsmooth way, such that the bullet speeds kind of shotgun forward or quickly accelerate and become kind of difficult to dodge. I think this is mitigated a little bit by the fact that the sprites of W type's shot is like slows down the game a little bit more than maybe S, but still I think that, oh, there I bombed again because I was afraid of the shotgun. But you can kind of still see that bullets will linger on the screen for a long time, crawling over the screen. And then as soon as some of them leave, they start to get faster and faster and they accelerate. And that's probably the most dangerous thing about this stage, and also just playing Maniac mode in general. And that's something that I didn't notice as much when playing original mode. Here's a pretty dangerous part of the stage 3. Not this part in particular, but the part immediately following, where kind of the head comes into view and you fight that you know, that little mini boss, I guess. Not quite a mid boss, but basically a mid boss. Those large moth enemies kind of fire those really dense patterns, so you want to be on the correct side of the screen when they come out. Um, I realize that that's probably the first time I said that this run, but it's always important. Here I take a quick death. That was what my first big mistake. It was a really simple pattern that was also pretty slow, no shotgun effect in sight, and I just, you know, did not dodge it. So yeah, kind of a stupid error. And at this point in the run, I'm like, I made a pretty big mistake rather early, so maybe I should just restart. But I decided to keep going, and I'm happy that it worked out. Because I took that death, I usually try to only one bomb this section to get the extend. But because I had taken that death, I wasn't taking any risks. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to use two of my bombs here um, in order to secure this extend without dying. And there it is. So stage 3 boss, I also kind of mess up my strategy. If you point blank it enough with W type and using the super shot here, you can actually kill it before it does its third pattern, I believe. So this is pattern 1, and I'm really trying to get as much damage to it as possible. Um, and skipping the phases is, just a good strategy in general. It gives you less opportunity to die. So here I'm trying to go in very quickly just to point blank, but he doesn't die. And this is the pattern that I have trouble dodging. So if I had done my strategy right, he would have ended his phase and the bullets would have canceled before it got too crowded. But unfortunately, I didn't implement my strategy well enough, so I had to bomb there. And that's not good because that pattern I usually have a planned bomb as well. So instead of bombing once, I actually had to bomb twice on that boss, which, coupled with the fact that I used an extra bomb to get that extend, is not super great so far. I wouldn't say that that's or I referred earlier to like saying that I made 3 major mistakes. I don't count that as a major mistake. I count dying with the full bomb stock or partial bomb stock as a large mistake. So look forward to more of those as this run progresses. Stage 4 is, I would say, actually probably more difficult than in Maniac mode than original. And I think the reason is mostly because of these beetles. They shoot in original mode, they shoot very fast, but I guess the bullet patterns aren't as dense, so they're a bit easier to dodge, or I can dodge them without having to rely on a bomb, or pretty consistently. However, in this stage, when you get that section where the beetles kind of come two at a time, it's a little bit scary, actually very scary, and in my opinion, a bit more difficult than the original mode. So that's kind of an exception to what I was saying earlier. But still, because a lot of the stage, especially the ending portion, is kind of auto-routed, where you're following the dragonflies on top of their spines and whatever, that part is really simple. So in that sense, it's not a significant increase in difficulty, just those small sections like the beetles, etc. Here is the part that I'm talking about. So you can tap dodge to the left or the right, and these windows kind of open up, but it's a bit scary, and you kind of have to believe a little bit in it. Uh, you can see here I'm about to take a death there, so that's not great. But I wouldn't call that a mistake either because I didn't have any bombs left, and I usually bomb that section. So it's a death that I expected, and so I wasn't so hard on myself for that. The nice thing about that death, or a silver lining of that death, is that I was actually able to get formation again from this option pickup. So this option pickup before this mid boss starts out as trace, and what I wanted to do was to wait it out so that it changed back to formation before picking it up. But sometimes the boss kind of gives you a troll pattern, or you can't really pick it up in time. But because I died there, I was actually able to pick it up before the trace, or after the trace swapped out. So if you look right here, you can see that or right here, you can see that that was my big mistake. I was just very overconfident with that dodge through those like spine bullets, and I just ran straight into a bullet. So that is a big mistake, completely my fault. And you know, I had full bombs at that point. It was kind of devastating to me. I was like, oh man, like this really guaranteed that I'm not gonna clear it because that death of the Beatles, like I can take. I just had to dodge it and I couldn't make the dodge. But that one was just me being a bit too aggressive, and so that's not great. But thankfully, the end of this section is rather easy. It's basically the same route as original mode, except in my opinion, a little bit easier because you can reaction dodge more things. You don't have to worry about the popcorn spawning as much. You can just take your route slowly throughout these dragonflies. And also, because you point blank so many things in this stage, the W power really makes you kill things very quickly with the super shot. I could be wrong, but for Maniac mode, I also feel like I get the extends a lot sooner than in original mode. So I believe that I already have gotten all of the score extends at this point, and I think I got them quite a bit earlier. And so in original mode, I might have gotten it around this point, if not a little bit sooner. But I think in stage 3, or maybe the beginning of stage 4, I was able to get the second score extend. This boss is really annoying. I've practiced it for a really long time, and I found that I can consistently two bomb this boss if in that first pattern the tail part of it doesn't fire. So the tail actually fires bullets randomly throughout that pattern, and if it doesn't fire when the first pattern, like when the main part of the pattern fires, then it's easy to dodge. But if it's not, if it fires at the same time, then I bomb there. And so you can see I used four bombs instead of two because I was really banking on that first pattern not giving me both at once. But when it became both at once, I had to bomb early. And then because I was kind of thrown off with, my route at that point, I had to bomb an additional time, so four times total, which is unfortunate. I don't have any more bombs going into stage five, but I have two extends. So it's, you know, this stage is the hardest of Maniac mode, of course. It's the hardest in original as well. And so I wasn't really confident at this point because, I hadn't, I've done okay on this stage. Like maybe I've been able to clear it with two lives in the bank and no bombs, but that's when, I some lucky dodges occurred and etc. So I was feeling kind of nervous at this point. Here is another ridiculous death. You can see what I mean by three big mistakes because that one again, I was running into a bullet. I was really aggressive trying to get that power up because I found that when practicing this stage that if I let that power up linger on the screen, I get kind of bogged down by all the popcorn fire. And then I can't get back to it before it cycles to S power or whatever. And that's really bad because, I don't I don't want to switch or shot types during this stage. It's not going to, it won't work out well because then your speed changes, etc. You get thrown off. So I was really aggressive with getting that power up, but I died because of it. So, really not a good start. Thankfully, this part is always really fun, with just going from, fishbowl plant to fishbowl plant, getting those really juicy cancels, and, just riding the wave of purple bullets, basically. The nice thing is that, W power just does so much damage that in these situations it looks really bad, but I'm actually, pretty confident in being able to get those screen clears. Um, so it's just fun at this point, and I think probably again my favorite part of Mushi. I think it's a lot of people's favorite part. Um, it's just a lot of fun, um, and something that I always enjoy, even playing this game for a long time. So here I'd want to keep formation just for that additional screen control, but you can see how I'm not really able to get it, um, even with using a bomb. So I don't want to get it, so I'm avoiding it. Yeah, and this is the type of thing like you're dodging like really dense patterns, and you're also looking at that power up. Like, please don't let it be Trace, right? Um, Thankfully, that worked out really perfectly. I mean, that was complete luck. But it will really help in this follow-up portion where the additional screen control is pretty important for survival. If I had a bomb, and I was a little bit, I did have a bomb, but I wasn't good enough to pick it up during the correct moment. But I should have, with a bomb, it's pretty simple to ensure that you get the formation power up. I was just not executing correctly there. But for your own reference, that would be how to get that power up with formation, the easiest way. Okay, so this is the latter half of stage 5. Things just get a little bit more hectic, especially those, you can see those like Mantis enemies. They fire denser patterns in Maniac, but they're not as fast. So in all, like, they're still very dangerous enemies. You want to kill them as soon as possible. These moths also, but just tap dodging to the left or right creates that opening, and you can just go right through. You can see there, I didn't have any bombs left. That's the last, yeah, that was basically taking another life. Yeah, I could have maybe dodged that, but yeah, it was just that one I don't count as a mistake. It was just, you know, it was just something that I knew was going to happen soon during this part. Not to say that it's not a mistake in general to die. I just mean that I didn't hold myself account, or I didn't hold it against my performance there because I knew it was a tough situation. Um, right. So this is the last part of stage 5. You always want to only use one bomb here, if any, because you know, um, you want to save them. So my strategy is always to just hold on as long as possible, tap dodge to the right, and then when it gets too dense, you just use a bomb to reposition yourself and clear the rest of the screen before you have to use another bomb. Here's Aki, or not the Aki fight, but the pre-Aki fight, or the final boss, not the TLB. And I guess this is probably where I would say that this fight is much easier in Maniac than it is in original, in my opinion, because the bullet speeds are much slower. There's one pattern that is a bit tricky, and you can just skip it by bombing, which is what I'll show here. But overall, like this first phase is really consistent for me, just because I had experience dodging them in original, and because the original, in my opinion, was a bit more difficult, this one seemed uh, simple by comparison. The thing with W power though is that you have to somewhat dodge this pattern because you don't really do enough damage when you're sitting at the bottom of the screen to the boss to be able to skip it. Whereas in S power using the super shot, you don't have to dodge this pattern at all. Thankfully, I was able to get through it okay. It's going to start repeating, but that also shows like how small the hitbox is going through those walls of bullets, and also why W power is pretty interesting here, or pretty useful. So here, my strategy is just to use the rest of my bombs to get through this dense pattern. This is the pattern that I think is a bit harder on Maniac than original, but I don't really have to dodge it, just bomb through it. And the final pattern is also, or final pattern is pretty easily dodged on Maniac. I know it's relatively static, so you can dodge it on original mode as well once you kind of get a feeling for how it works. But in Maniac, I didn't practice this part at all. This is just straight. Okay, I'm gonna weave through now. I'm gonna you know go into this corridor for a bit, and then I'm gonna come back out, and he's gonna fire this relatively easy and slow final pattern, and that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I mean that's the run. I was happy with the fact that I was able to eke it out despite my really stupid deaths. So I had two deaths where I ran into a bullet and died. So the bullet was just floating there, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna die now. Um, and the last mistake was when I died on the stage 3 mid boss, and that was just me kind of getting clipped, and I didn't really give myself enough distance. So yeah, that I should have known better for that one. But despite that, I was able to get through, you know, the final boss without dying, so with no missing the final boss. So that was cool. Um, yeah, overall, I would just say again that I always come back to this game. It's probably one of my favorites overall, and certainly the game that I've cleared the most modes in. And maybe at some point I'll try Ultra, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So yeah, thanks for watching.